Welcome to the video. Let your shoulders soften. Let the day slip away. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we'll journey far from the noise of the present. No buzzing notifications, no bright lights, no rush to be anywhere. Instead, we drift into the warm, quiet stillness of the past, to a place where the river is everything. A place older than legend, where kings built pyramids of their own, where queens stared down the Roman Empire, and where ordinary people shaped their lives from the dust and water around them. We are going to the Kingdom of Kush, ancient Nubia, south of Egypt, nestled between golden hills and the endless lifeline of the Nile. A land where sandals mattered more than scrolls, where gods took the form of lions and the sun, and where power was sometimes held in the hands of women. But before we meet the queens and scholars, before we step into temples or uncover tombs, let's begin in a quieter, rougher place. A workshop, a hut, a stretch of earth near the Nile. We begin with the makers of sandals. Not warriors, not nobles, not scribes, just the men and women who shaped raw hide into the only protection most people ever had for their feet. Imagine you are one of them, not an observer, but a participant. You live in a sun-baked village. Your tools are simple. Your labor is long. Your mornings begin in darkness and in silence, except for the hush of the river and the distant bleat of goats. This is not the history that makes it into textbooks, but it's the history that shaped every step of life in Kush. Tonight, we'll follow their rhythm, from miserable mornings and endless days to the fires of war, to forgotten tombs and golden thrones. But for now, breathe slowly, settle in, and feel the cracked leather in your hands. Imagine the air before dawn, still dense, not yet heavy with heat, but already full of it-like, a breath being held. You lie awake in the half-dark of your hut, staring at the fraying edges of the reed ceiling. Above you, woven mats sag between wooden beams, patched with old cloth and spiderweb. Dust hovers in the air like smoke, catching the faintest flickers of early light filtering in from the east. You didn't sleep much, you rarely do. The pain in your hands wakes you before the rooster does. Your fingers curl slowly, unwilling to move after yesterday's work. The joints creak, the skin feels stretched thin over swollen knuckles, and a small cut from a cracked awl has reopened. There's no bandage. You just rub a little ash into it and press your thumb over the wound until the sting fades. You sit up. The mat beneath you rustles, hardened from weeks of sweat and flattened grass. Outside, a goat lets out a long sigh. The day begins. You reach for the pitcher of water left by the door. It's warm, slightly metallic, but it wades your throat. You rinse your mouth, pour a trickle over your face, and rub the sleep from your eyes. The hut is narrow no more than 2 paces across. There's a small pile of firewood in one corner, a few clay jars with lentils and millet, and a small carved figurine tucked into the crook of the wall. A lion-headed goddess, worn smooth by time and touch. You press your fingers lightly to the idol's head. Not a full prayer, just habit. There's work to do. You wrap a strip of linen around your waist, your only garment. It used to be white long ago. Now it's sun-faded and patched with bits of other cloth. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the light is turning from silver to gold. You step outside and feel the dust between your toes. The village is still quiet. A few other doors creak open. Someone is already grinding grain with a flat stone. You can hear the rhythm scrape, scrape. A woman walks past carrying a basket of dried reeds. A boy trots behind her, still chewing on a piece of flatbread. He looks at you shyly and then looks away. You say nothing. You rarely speak in the mornings. Instead, you walk toward the riverbank. The Nile is the village's its provider, its danger, its horizon. It is everything. Even this early, the water is warm. It laps gently against the shore, slow and endless, greenish-brown and thick with silt. You crouch at the edge and lift one of the hides that has soaked overnight. It's dark, heavy, and sour-smelling, the flesh still clinging to the inner side. The fibers are soft, now ready to be scraped, shaped, and stitched into something useful. You sling the bundle of wet leather over your shoulder and walk back to your stall. The sun crests the hills in the distance, sending long streaks of gold across the rooftops. The heat rises with it. Your stall is simple for poles, a sagging mat for shade, a bench carved from a hollowed-out log. Everything is worn, sun-bleached, and coated with a thin film of dust. There's no door, no privacy, just the open air and the endless rhythm of labor. You sit, stretch your legs, and begin. You place the hide across your thighs, grip it tight, and start to scrape. Your flint blade is sharp, but uneven. It skips sometimes. You lean forward, pressing with your shoulder, stripping away the old flesh from the inner side of the skin. Scrape, and again, and again. Your muscles remember the movement. They've done it thousands of times. You settle into the rhythm. Scrape, strip, smooth, press. The motion is meditative. It hurts, but it also quiets the mind. A fly buzzes near your ear. You swat it away. The sun is higher now. The light pierces the edge of your canopy. Your skin begins to glisten with sweat. You squint, not from pain, but from the brightness of the dust as it floats in the air like ash. Other workers pass by, basket weavers, potters, a teenage boy carrying a long curved staff on his way to herd goats. You nod to each of them. Some nod back. No one lingers. The heat urges movement. The day demands it. By late morning, your fingers are red. Your shoulders ache. You've finished one pair, begun another. The sandals are simple two-straps, one sole, stitched with sinew from old animals, hardened and smoked. They're made to last a few months, maybe less. Soldiers wear them until the straps snap. Then they come back for more. Sometimes the garrison commander sends a messenger, usually a boy, with a scowl, to demand a rush order. You never say no. You simply bow and work faster. Once, you asked for more grain in exchange. The boy laughed and walked away. The next day, your neighbor was given the order instead. He had to give you half his grain to make peace. Since then, you keep your head down. You think of your father, sometimes also a sandal maker. You remember his hands, larger than yours, deeply grooved like tree bark. He taught you to measure using only your knuckles, to test the strength of a strap by tugging it 3 times, not 2. He used to whistle while he worked. You don't. A few more hours pass. The sun is brutal now. Your tongue is dry. You chew a sliver of salt root to draw moisture into your mouth. It tastes bitter, but it works. A priest's apprentice passes by, headed for the shrine. He wears white linen and smells faintly of incense and frankincense. His sandals were made by you. He doesn't meet your eyes. By early afternoon, you take a short pause. You sip water from a shared jug and eat a few dried dates, sticky with heat. You rest your head against the wooden pole and let your eyes close, but only for a moment. There are still 3 pairs left to finish. You return to the leather. You trim the heel, thread the sinew, not the strap. The sun tilts toward the west. You find the rhythm again. Scrape, stitch, not shape, like breath, like prayer, like the Nile. The work is hard, endless, repetitive, but it is also your craft. Your hands know what to do. Even when your mind drifts, they move on their own. You don't think of rest. You don't think of escape. You think of the next sandal and the one after that. Because sandals are always needed, and there are always more feet to cover. And that is how a morning passes. Not in haste, not in noise, but in dust, leather, sweat, and silence. By mid-morning, the sun above the Kingdom of Kush has already erased any trace of dawn's gentleness. The sandal maker sits cross-legged on a worn mat beside the workshop wall, his shoulders hunched and bare beneath the rising heat, his fingers soaked in tannin-stained water that clings like sap to the creases of his skin. The hides, soaked overnight in Nile water and ash, are laid flat before him, their surface dark and swollen, smelling faintly of damp earth and raw sinew. There is no urgency in his motions, only the practiced repetition of a trade learned through long observation and quiet obedience. The sharp edge of a crescent blade whispers across the leather, scraping away grit, fat, and hair with gentle pressure. His hands move instinctively, navigating scars in the hide, adjusting for tears, curling edges, and uneven tanning. The sun reflects from the smoothened surface, highlighting the faint shimmer of moisture that has not yet dried, while the workshop around him hums with a low chorus of scraping, tapping, and the soft groan of tired joints. A boy nearby coughs, once dry and rasping, but otherwise no one speaks, each absorbed in his own measured rhythm. By the time the sun reaches its peak, the air within the workshop yard has thickened into a shimmering sheet, blurring the outlines of the low stone walls and causing the distant trees to waver like reflections in water. The sandal maker's back is striped with sweat and grit. The woven mat beneath him softened by use, but rough enough to leave impressions on his skin. His tools, few and simple, lie within easy reach. The scraper, a bone awl, a punch made from antler, and a stone weight. These are all he needs to turn a stiff hide into something that can endure miles of hot stone, thorny brush, and soldiers' marching drills. There are no true breaks, only pauses. When the overseer steps away, the sandal maker takes a slow drink from a cracked cup filled with warm water drawn from a sun-warmed clay jar. The water carries a faint taste of dust and algae, but it soothes the throat and quiets the pounding in his temples. He chews on dried dates, their sweetness faint and clinging, offering just enough energy to carry on. Others sit quietly too, their faces downturned, their shoulders rising and falling with the slow rhythm of survival, waiting for the shadow to shift and the work to begin again. The overseer returns, walking the length of the yard with long, deliberate steps. His voice is rough and disinterested as he calls out names, marking progress, asking nothing of effort beyond constancy. He inspects the hides without comment, eyes flicking from stitch to seam, sole to strap. The men have learned not to watch him too closely, not to bristle at his silence, not to answer unless spoken to. His approval is most often measured by absence, no reprimand, no punishment, just a nod and movement on. When sandals are completed, they are tied in pairs with leather cords and stacked in a reed basket. The day's work reduced to a quiet, uneven pyramid of necessity. On market days, the sandal maker carries them through the village paths and into the sun-baked open square, where soldiers and traders move between stalls of dried fish, grain, salt, and bronze trinkets. The smell here is sharp sweat and iron, livestock dung, and old perfume butt. It is here that value is determined. He approaches customers carefully, his eyes low, voice measured, offering durability, not luxury. The soldiers want strong sandals that will not fall apart during the long marches south or in desert patrols along the Nile. They examine the soles, bend the straps, spit slightly to test the grain of the leather. Their bargaining is blunt and often dismissive, their offers barely covering the cost of the rawhide and tannins used in the making. But the sandal maker nods, accepts what he must, because the alternative is returning home with nothing. Payment is often given in handfuls of grain, chipped coins, or dried river fish tied with reed twine. He does not linger after trade. He has little to spend and less to browse. His return walk passes by the wealthier quarter, where temple priests and noblemen sit beneath canopies of linen, their servants fanning them with palm fronds. Their sandals are different decorated, perfumed, stitched with colored thread end. Sometimes he wonders who made them, whether they were crafted nearby by better paid hands, or imported from the workshops in Meru, where the artisans wore clean robes and sat on raised benches. He never asks. To ask is to invite longing, and longing has no place in work that must begin again at dawn. The younger boys in the workshop are still learning the tempo of the trade. Their fingers are clumsy, their stitches uneven, their frustration easily read on their furrowed brows. He does not scold them. Instead, he shows them how to fold a strap so it rests smooth across the arch of a foot, how to pierce a hole without splitting the leather, how to recognize a poor hide before wasting time on it. These are lessons taught not through instruction, but example, in silence, by motion and repetition and time. Sometimes the leather refuses to cooperate. A batch might be too dry, curling before it's cut, or it may hold the smell of rot if left too long in the tanning pits. The sandals made from such hides will blister feet or fall apart too quickly, and angry customers return shouting or demanding repayment. There is no recourse but to accept the blame, to remake the sandals, to endure the reprimand of the overseer, even when the fault was in the hide, not the hand. The craft demands patience as much as skill, and resilience more than pride. The sandal maker knows that no one will remember his name 100 years from now. There are no stelae carved in his honor, no prayers offered at his grave, no lines of poetry bearing his deeds. But his sandals may carry a merchant's feet across the desert, may hold firm beneath the stride of a Kandake's messenger, may leave their imprint on temple stone, where history does not notice the worker, but only the work. That is enough. That is survival. That is legacy, even if it is forgotten. And so the sun dips low again, casting long shadows over the stone yard, softening the hard lines of the day. The men gather their tools in quiet, folding their mats, covering the unused hides with cloth to protect them from dust. His back aches. His fingers feel thick and tender at the joints, but the sandals are finished. The day survived. He walks home slowly, the dust of the path rising around his ankles, the sky above him tinged with fading red. Another endless day complete, and another to come. In the quiet heartlands of Kush, life carries on with little change. The leather is still soaked, the sandals still stitched, and the river still flows as it always has. But in the north, where the borderlands blur into Egypt, the Nile begins to carry more than just water. It brings stories, rumors of soldiers, of Roman governors, of strange taxes and tightening controls. Not long ago, Egypt belonged to pharaohs and queens of Macedonian descent. Cleopatra VII was the last of them, and with her death, Rome absorbed the ancient land into its vast and growing empire. In Rome, Augustus Caesar declares himself princeps first among equals, and, all across the Mediterranean, provinces bow beneath the eagle standard. But south of Egypt, beyond Rome's maps and expectations, stands a kingdom that does not yield so easily. Kush is older than the Roman Empire, and older even than many of the pharaohs Rome now claims to follow. Its people live in the valleys and deserts of Nubia, between golden hills and sun-baked plateaus. Its cities, like Meru and Napatar, centers of religion, trade, and royal power, adorned with steep pyramids and lined with temples to lion-headed gods. And at the head of this kingdom is not a pharaoh, nor a general, but a queen. Her name is Amanirenas. She is a Kandake mother and sovereign in her own right, one of a long line of ruling women in Kushite history. Unlike in Rome or even Egypt, where women often ruled only in absence or crisis, the Kandakes of Kush hold direct authority. They command armies, issue laws, and speak as the embodiment of the state. Amanirenas is no exception. She is known to have lost an eye, though no one agrees on how. Some say it was in battle, struck by an arrow as she led her troops. Others whisper that it was a divine injury, a sacrifice demanded by the gods to mark her destiny. Whatever the truth, her injury becomes part of her legend. She is remembered not in spite of her blindness, but because of it. As Rome tightens its grip on Egypt, it assumes Kush will follow suit. New taxes are imposed on merchants crossing the frontier. Patrols begin harassing border settlements. Officials from Alexandria send messengers to Meru, demanding compliance, seeking tribute, implying submission. But Amanirenas does not answer with words. She answers with movement. She assembles her forces, drawing warriors from across the kingdom, archers with long Nubian bows, cavalry riders from desert outposts, conscripts from the villages along the Nile. Their weapons are iron, their shields hardened leather, their feet protected by the very sandals made in humble huts far from the palace. They march north into Roman territory. It is the year 24 BCE when the strike begins. The Kushite army moves swiftly, taking the Romans by surprise at Syena, present-day Aswan. The Roman garrison is overwhelmed, their defenses unprepared for the southern assault. Statues of Augustus are pulled from pedestals, their stone faces shattered beneath Kushite boots. In one account, a bronze head of Augustus is taken from the battlefield. It is brought back to Meru and buried beneath the steps of a temple, face down in the earth. In doing so, Amanirenas symbolically places the Emperor of Rome beneath the feet of her people. Every time a priest ascends those stairs, Rome is trodden upon. Rome does not take the insult lightly. Augustus dispatches Gaius Petronius, the governor of Egypt, and a seasoned military man. He marches south with thousands of legionaries determined to punish and subdue the upstart kingdom. His campaign is rapid and ruthless. The Romans retake Syene. They push through the borderlands, through Elephantine and into Kushite lands. Napata, one of Kush's sacred cities, is seized and sacked. Its temples are looted, its people scattered, and its stone walls bear the mark of Rome's vengeance. But Amanirenas does not break. She does not surrender her throne or beg for terms. Instead, she pulls her forces back, not in defeat, but in strategy. She knows that time, terrain, and the sun itself will wear down her enemies. The Roman legions are powerful, but they are far from home. Their heavy armor chafes in the desert heat. Their sandals clog with sand. Their supplies grow thin the further they march. The Nile provides water, but not guidance. Its branches are foreign here, its paths uncertain. Kushite fighters adapt quickly. They strike from ridges, vanish into ravines, ambush in canyons where the sun blinds and echoes distort. Their bows are longer than the Roman short bows, and their arrows fly farther with deadly force. They are not trying to win a single battle, they are trying to endure. Years pass, raids continue, Roman forts are built and abandoned. Each side tests the other, neither willing to fall back completely, neither able to fully claim the land. It becomes clear that there will be no clean victory. And so, at last, words replace swords. Amanirenas sends envoys north, not to a general, but to Augustus himself. Negotiations follow quiet, deliberate, drawn out in the shadows of temples and under the scrutiny of scribes. The outcome is nothing short of extraordinary. Kush agrees to peace, but pays no tribute, no gold, no grain, no slaves. The Romans withdraw from Napata and reduce their southern border to Maharaka, far north of where they had once marched. Kush retains its sovereignty entirely intact. The campaign ends not with a conquest, but with an agreement. A boundary is drawn not in blood, but in understanding. Amanirenas has done what few rulers ever managed. She has fought Rome to a stalemate and walked away free. Her kingdom stands, her people remain untouched by the imperial yoke. The bronze head of Augustus remains buried in Meru, a quiet symbol, a memory pressed into the earth, a lesson in resistance. For the common people, potters, weavers, sandal makers, the war may have seemed distant. They did not hold swords or draft treaties, but they endured the same sun, felt the same shifts in wind, heard the same rumors drifting along the river. They knew that their queen had faced the eagle and survived. In the hush of the evening, after a day of work, someone might whisper her name as the sky turned red. Amanirenas, the lion mother, the blind queen who saw more clearly than Rome ever could. Her story, once nearly lost to time, lingers in stone, in sand, and in the rhythm of the Nile. The war had ended, not with a roar, but with a breath. The soldiers no longer marched through Kushite lands, and the roads, once worn thin by military boots, slowly softened again beneath ordinary feet. The grain fields near Napata were sown anew, and the sound of clashing steel faded, replaced by the everyday tones of grinding stones, rustling reeds, and creaking carts. For the people of Kush, the change came not with fanfare, but as a slow return to the familiar. In Meru, the capital continued to pulse with quiet authority. Smoke curled from blacksmith forges, and camels carrying ivory and incense moved between market stalls. The temples, long scarred by the Roman campaign, were cleaned and repainted, their walls once again echoing with hymns sung to the gods of sun, water, and war. Craftspeople repaired what had been broken statues. Walls, even sandals, and life resumed its ordinary, methodical rhythm. But something had changed, invisibly, yet unmistakably. A boundary had been drawn not with chalk or fire, but with endurance. Rome had reached its limit not because it was defeated in battle, but because it was met by a people who would not be erased. It was a lesson that rippled outward, felt by neighboring kingdoms, and whispered by merchants who crossed the frontier with greater care. There had been other victories against Rome in history, but few were as quiet or complete. The Kushites did not become Roman subjects. They were not made tributaries, nor forced to accept garrisons or governors. There was no statue of Augustus in Meru, no Roman temples, no imperial tax offices carved into the sandstone hills. Instead, there was a buried head, and above it, the people walked freely. To the scribes in Alexandria and Rome, the outcome was inconvenient. It did not fit the narrative of inevitable conquest, of empire spreading like the tide. And so, it was recorded sparsely, awkwardly, as though the facts embarrassed the parchment. But the silence in Roman records only made the story echo louder in the lands of Kush. In temples along the Nile, the story of Amanirenas was preserved in relief and ritual. She became more than a queen, she became a symbol. The Kandake who met the empire with one eye and unbroken will, whose armies struck and vanished, whose envoys returned home without shame. Her story did not need embellishment. Its quiet boldness spoke for itself. This aftermath was not just survival, it was sovereignty maintained against the odds. The people of Kush had seen invaders come and go. They had witnessed empires rise and fall, but never before had they seen a force as vast and famed as Rome. Step back and accept the unyielding borders of a small desert kingdom. It reshaped not just maps, but imagination. Over time, a kind of peace settled over the frontier. Roman merchants returned, but they no longer traveled with arrogance. They offered silver, fabric, and why not demands. Their words were more careful, their hands less certain. In a strange reversal, it was Kush that became the gatekeeper. The people of Kush resumed their rhythms, but they walked with a slightly straighter spine. The farmers still bent to the fields, but they did so without the fear of foreign soldiers claiming their harvest. The weavers still spun their thread, but now they wore their patterns with pride, knowing their kingdom had not been absorbed into another's design. Even the children who played near the temples heard the name Amanirenas, spoken with a kind of reverent defiance. In markets, stories drifted like smoke of how the queen had ridden into battle in a chariot lined with lion pelts, how her archers had turned back armored Romans with long, dark arrows. These were tales told half in truth, half in legend. But beneath the embellishment lay a real triumph. Rome had come and Rome had gone. Kush remained. Generations passed and the war became memory. But the memory had weight. It lingered in the carved stone of boundary markers, in the inscriptions on temple walls, and in the silent presence of pyramids that were never touched by imperial hands. It was a legacy built. The victory shaped more than politics, it shaped identity. Kush had not needed Rome's architecture, language, or religion to find its place in history. It had remained distinctly itself. Its gods were not replaced, its rulers did not bow. Its artisans continued to craft in styles unchanged by empire, and its traders still looked east and south, not only north. Even as Rome marched on to other territories, Gaul, Judea, Britannuit never again pushed deeper into Kush. The sands, once darkened by war, remained untouched. The Nile flowed as it always had, but the boundary of empire had found its edge. Not every river could be crossed. And beneath the steps of a temple in Meru, the bronze likeness of Augustus Caesar remained buried, not melted down, not displayed as a trophy, simply placed underfoot, face turned downward, pressed into the soil of a land he could not claim. It was not vengeance, it was statement. The act of burying the head was deliberate, symbolic, and deeply Kushite. In their tradition, the placement of statues, the orientation of faces, and the direction of burial all held spiritual meaning. By placing the emperor beneath the temple's threshold, the people of Kush ensured that he would be walked over with every prayer. He became, in effect, part of the foundation, not honored, but contained. Over the years, the empire's attention moved elsewhere. Rome became occupied with Germanic incursions, internal politics, and distant provinces, requiring new legions. Kush was left in peace, its independence respected more out of pragmatism than admiration, but that suited Kush just fine. Silence, after all, had always been its strength. In workshops and riverbanks, people resumed their ordinary lives, but they did so knowing that their land had defied the world's mightiest power. They had not expanded, but they had not been diminished. And that is its own kind of empire, sovereignty of the spirit, of the soil, of the self. Even now, centuries later, the story of Amanirenas stands out not for bloodshed, but for balance. She held the sword, but she also held the treaty. She buried Rome's pride, but she preserved her people's peace. Her war ended not in ruins, but in reaffirmation. The queen had drawn a line in the sand, and Rome, for once, did not cross it. The wind that moves across the deserts of Kush is soft but insistent. It carries grains of sand that shift imperceptibly, hour by hour, day by day, year by year. Entire dunes migrate over time, slowly swallowing and revealing the bones of forgotten worlds. Beneath these shifting layers lie echoes of a kingdom that once stood proud beside the Nile, now resting in silence and stone. For centuries, the monuments of Kush stood exposed under the open sky, but as dynasties fell and trade routes shifted, many of its sacred places were abandoned to the desert. The sands crept forward as they always do, slow, patient, and thorough, covering the steps of temples, creeping into courtyards, cloaking entire cities. By the time European explorers arrived in the region thousands of years later, much of Kush's past was buried beneath silence. Among the most striking of these hidden remnants are the pyramids of Meru. Dozens of them rise from the desert in neat rows, smaller and steeper than their Egyptian cousins, but no less proud. Some are intact, with sharp triangular silhouettes against the sky, while others are broken, cracked open by time or looted by treasure seekers long gone. Their sandstone blocks are warm to the touch, etched with hieroglyphs in the Meroitic script, a language still only partially understood. The pyramids served as royal tombs for queens and kings, Kandakes, and warrior princes. They were built with a distinct Nubian flair, compact, elegant, often adorned with a small funerary chapel at the base. These chapels held inscriptions and painted scenes depicting the life of the dead, along with offerings to guide them into the afterlife. But unlike the great tombs of Egypt, the burial chambers here were dug deep into the ground, accessed through sloping shafts that once sealed the bodies away from view. Over the centuries, many of these chambers were breached. Looters from both ancient and modern times pried open entrances, searching for gold, ivory, or enchanted relics. But even when stripped of their treasures, the tombs still spoke. Fragments of painted pottery, shards of funerary masks, and scraps of burial cloth whispered stories in muted tones. In one tomb, archaeologists discovered the remains of sandals, carefully placed beside a skeleton, perhaps a symbolic offering to aid the dead in their journey beyond. These sandals were simple two soles, bound by twisted leather cords, but their shape matched those still made in nearby villages, barely changed by time. The imprint of a toe here, a worn crease there, hinted at a life once walked, now at rest. In another tomb, small clay molds were found used, perhaps by artisans, to shape soles or cut straps, long before the body was laid to rest. Elsewhere, burial texts were etched into the walls of narrow chambers. Others were inventories, lists of items buried alongside the dead, including jars of honey, sheaves of grain, and even tools. These texts are written in Meroitic script, a script both familiar and obscure, which still resists full translation even today. Each character is a puzzle, each inscription a whisper waiting to be heard. The preservation of these tombs varies. Some remain dry and intact, protected by layers of sand that acted as a natural seal. Others were collapsed or eroded, their contents scattered by time and wind. Yet even fragments hold value. A chipped amulet, a cracked ceramic jug, or the faded outline of a mural can reveal entire chapters of cultural memory. As the sun moves overhead, its rays shift across the surface of these forgotten monuments. The heat rises from the ground, and mirages ripple across the horizon, distorting distance, blending sky and earth. The pyramids stand quiet, their shadows sharp and long. There is no sign of the lives once buried here, and yet there is everything. Archaeologists who dig in these sands often speak of a silence so complete it feels ancient. Their tools are delicate brushes, wooden picks, small trowels designed not to break the past, but to coax it gently into view. They kneel for hours in the sun, clearing grains of sand from hieroglyphs, uncovering bits of cloth that crumble at a breath. It is patient work, reverent in its slowness. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, many foreign explorers came to Meru with more curiosity than care. Some dynamited pyramid walls in search of treasure, taking artifacts back to Europe and leaving broken chambers behind. But more recent excavations, often led by Sudanese scholars, focus on conservation, not conquest. They seek not to extract, but to understand. What emerges from these sites is not just a list of names and dates, but a textured glimpse into a worldview now distant from our own. It was a world where sandals were sacred, where queens ruled with divine authority, and where the dead were equipped with the tools they needed to walk into eternity. It was a world built on both ritual and routine, where death mirrored life in its careful preparation and handmade detail. In the burial ground outside Meru, small mounds mark the graves of nobles and commoners alike. Though they are less grand than the royal pyramids, they are no less meaningful. Many are oriented toward the rising sun, their entrances angled eastward, so that the dead would awaken each day to the light of renewal. Among these graves, remnants of woven mats, copper tools, and yes, leather sandals have been found. The presence of sandals in burials speaks to something gentle, something deeply human, not wealth or power, but mobility. The idea that even in death one might walk, might travel, might continue. To leave the body barefoot would be unthinkable, to walk into the afterlife unprepared. Today, these ancient tombs still speak, though softly. The desert has given up many of its secrets, but many remain hidden just beneath the surface. Every gust of wind uncovers a shard. Every brushstroke reveals another syllable of a forgotten prayer. And so the past rises slowly, like a form emerging from the sand, not in grandeur, but in fragments. Somewhere deep in one of these tombs, the worn imprint of a human foot still rests in the dust beside an empty mold. It's not gold, it's not a king's treasure, but it tells a story far richer than jewels, a story of hands that made, of feet that walked, and of a culture that buried its memories gently, expecting the earth to keep them safe. And for the most part, it did. Imagine yourself standing quietly on the gentle banks of the Nile just before sunrise. The river's surface, a smooth mirror, reflecting a pale, awakening sky. The air is cool and filled with the subtle fragrance of lotus blossoms and damp earth, mingling in a calm breath that seems to hold the world still. Far off, the soft beat of ceremonial drums begins to rise, steady and rhythmic, calling the faithful to the temples where stone columns stand like silent sentinels, guarding secrets as old as the desert sands. This is a world deeply attuned to the cycles of nature and spirit, a world where gods are woven intimately into the fabric of daily life. Sun worship forms the luminous center of Kushite belief, wrapped in both awe and quiet reverence. The sun god, Apedmak, often depicted with the fierce head of a lion, embodies strength, courage, and fierce protection, qualities vital for survival in the arid lands bordering the Nile. The carved images of Apedmak appear across temple walls and royal monuments. Every morning, incense curls upward in gentle spirals from braziers, filling the cool temple air with the scent of myrrh and frankincense as priests chant hymns that honor the sun's steady journey, its life-giving warmth, and its eternal promise to return. But the spiritual landscape of Kush is a complex tapestry of many gods, spirits, and ancestors, all playing roles in the ongoing story of life and death. Alongside Apedmak stands Amen, the hidden god of air and fertility, whose presence is felt rather than seen, a divine breath sustaining all that grows. The pantheon also includes animal spirits, river gods, and celestial forces, each receiving homage in carefully tended temples and shrines. Worshippers come with quiet steps, their hands lifted in prayer, their voices low, immersed in rituals that have been passed down through countless generations, like a sacred current flowing beneath the desert heat. The role of ancestors in Kushite culture is both profound and intimate. The dead are not distant memories, but living presences, woven into the lives of their descendants through offerings, prayers, and remembrance. Families maintain small shrines at their homes or within communal spaces, placing food, drink, and oils to nourish the spirits and invite their blessings. These acts of devotion are not simply ceremonial, they are vital connections that sustain health, prosperity, and protection against misfortune. In Kush, the past is a gentle shadow, always at one's side, guiding and guarding without demanding attention. Royal women, particularly the Kandakes, occupy a sacred and commanding place within this spiritual and social order. These queens are more than rulers. They are living symbols of divine power, bridging the realms of gods and mortals. Their authority is deeply intertwined with ideas of fertility, protection, and cosmic balance, and their rule is seen as essential to the kingdom's harmony. Artistic depictions show them crowned with radiant solar discs and lion motifs, a visual language that blends maternal nurture, fierce guardianship, and divine sanction into one. The Kandake's sacred power extends into religious ritual as well as governance. They actively participate in ceremonies that reaffirm their connection to deities like Apedmak and Ammon, embodying the living will of the gods on earth. Their matrilineal descent, the passage of royal blood through the female line, is exceptional in the ancient world. granting them authority and influence unmatched in many other societies. These queens' voices resonate within temple walls and royal courts alike, shaping the spiritual and political life of Kush with steady determination and grace. Within the cool, shadowed chambers of the temples, ritual unfolds with deliberate, unhurried rhythm. Thick tendrils of incense smoke curl upward, weaving through shafts of morning light that illuminate richly painted reliefs. Flickering lamps cast gentle dancing shadows on the walls, where scenes depict gods battling chaos, bestowing blessings and guiding souls on their journey beyond. Worshippers move with quiet reverence, their footsteps softened by woven mats, their voices low and steady, focused on the mysteries that have shaped their world for centuries. The lion, an ever-present symbol in Kushite iconography, embodies a dual nature of ferocity and nurturing protection. Lion imagery adorns temple doorways, royal coffins, and the personal jewelry of the elite, a constant reminder that survival depends on both courage and care. The Lion Queen, often portrayed with this majestic creature, exemplifies the balance of strength and compassion necessary for leadership. Her image is a quiet but powerful presence, a symbol of enduring resilience amid the shifting sands of history. Ancestor rites often coincide with the agricultural cycle, weaving together the sacred and the practical. Harvest festivals are occasions to honor those who came before, offering thanks and seeking blessings for future fertility. These ceremonies reinforce the bonds within communities, reminding all that prosperity depends on the delicate balance between earth and spirit. Through these rituals, faith becomes inseparable from daily life, a steady thread connecting generations past, present, and future. As night falls over the Nile, the water mirrors the deep indigo sky sprinkled with stars. The air cools, carrying distant drumbeats and soft prayers that echo into the darkness. The sacred becomes tangible in this twilight space, where past and present intertwine in quiet harmony. Kush's faith flows steadily, guiding the humble sandal maker and the mighty Kandake alike through life's cycles, offering calm certainty amid the desert's vastness. Imagine yourself walking slowly through the shaded corridors of a Kushite palace, where the air is thick with the soft, lingering scent of exotic perfumes. These fragrances are rich and complex, a blend of fragrant resins, sweet myrrh, and delicate flowers grown along the Nile's fertile banks. They drift gently from alabaster jars, placed carefully on carved wooden tables, filling the space with a calm elegance that soothes the senses and invites quiet reflection. In this world, scent is not merely decoration, but a subtle language of power and refinement. The royal garments of Kush were woven from the finest cloths, many imported from faraway lands through the bustling trade routes centered in Meru. Soft velvets and brightly colored linens, dyed with natural pigments derived from plants and minerals, were fashioned into flowing robes and intricately pleated skirts. These fabrics caught the light in shimmering waves, their textures cool against the skin on warm days and comforting in the chill of desert evenings. Each thread spoke of distant journeys across deserts, rivers, and mountains, woven into the fabric of royal identity. Feathered headdresses were another striking symbol of status and spirituality among the Kushite elite. Crafted from the plumage of local and exotic birds, these adornments were arranged with meticulous care to create dazzling displays of color and form. Their feathers rustled softly in the breeze, a delicate sound that echoed the whispered prayers offered to the gods. Wearing these headdresses was both an act of beauty and of ritual, linking the wearer to the natural world and to divine protection. Lapis lazuli, a deep blue gemstone prized for its intense color and smooth surface, was treasured by Kushite artisans and rulers alike. Imported from distant lands to the east, this stone was carved into beads, amulets, and inlays for jewelry and ceremonial objects. Its rich blue hue was often associated with the heavens, symbolizing the eternal sky watched over by the sun god Apidmak. To touch lapis lazuli was to connect with something timeless and vast, a reminder of the wider world beyond the Nile and the kingdom's place within it. Perfumes, cloths, feathers, and jewels were not merely displays of wealth, but threads in a delicate fabric of power and identity. They were worn during ceremonies, court gatherings, and important rituals, each element carefully chosen to convey messages of authority, grace, and divine favor. The soft rustle of robes, the subtle shimmer of jewels, and the faint scent of incense created an atmosphere that was at once luxurious and deeply spiritual, grounding the royal presence in both the earthly and the divine. Trade routes radiated from Meru, bringing goods from as far as India, Arabia, and the Mediterranean. Merchants arrived with exotic spices, fine textiles, and precious stones, exchanging these treasures for Kushite, gold, ivory, and iron. This flow of goods enriched the cultural life of the kingdom, introducing new styles and materials while strengthening ties with far-off lands. In marketplaces and royal courts alike, the mingling of local and imported items told stories of connection and continuity. The crafting of royal attire and adornments was itself an art form, carried out by skilled artisans who worked patiently to transform raw materials into objects of beauty and meaning. Weavers spun fine threads, dyers prepared vibrant colors from plants and minerals, and jewelers shaped stones with delicate tools. Each piece was imbued with symbolic significance, designed to honor the wearer and reflect their role within the kingdom's complex social and spiritual order. Feathered headdresses often incorporated symbols of animals revered in Kushite culture: lions, falcons, and snakes, each chosen for their protective and spiritual qualities. These headdresses could be large and elaborate, towering above the wearer's head, or smaller and more subtle, worn during intimate rituals. The feathers themselves were carefully selected for their colors and textures, arranged in patterns that echoed the natural world and its cycles of growth, death, and renewal. Lapis lazuli beads were strung into necklaces, bracelets, and rings, their polished surfaces catching the light with a cool, steady gleam. Some were carved with symbols or inscriptions, carrying prayers or protective spells. Wearing such jewelry was believed to bring the wearer closer to the divine, offering blessings and safeguarding against harm. The deep blue of lapis lazuli became a visual thread linking earthly power with celestial forces. Royal perfumes, too, played a role beyond mere fragrance. Made from a blend of natural ingredients such as frankincense, myrrh, and flower essences, these scents were thought to purify the wearer and the surrounding space. They were used in daily grooming rituals as well as in elaborate ceremonies, their aromas rising like invisible prayers to the gods. The careful preparation and application of perfumes reinforced the sacred nature of the royal person and their close relationship with divine power. Walking through the royal courts of Kush, one would be surrounded by a sensory tapestry woven from these rich materials, soft velvets brushing against the skin, the shimmering light playing on jewels, the faint rustle of feathers, and the lingering fragrance of sacred oils. This atmosphere was both calming and commanding, inviting respect and quiet awe without the need for loud proclamations or ostentatious display. It was a subtle assertion of authority, rooted in tradition and spiritual connection. These elements of velvet and gold, feathers and lapis lazuli, were threads in the larger story of Kush's place in the ancient world. They connected the kingdom to vast trade networks and cultural exchanges, linking its people to distant lands and diverse peoples. Yet, at the same time, they affirmed a unique identity, one shaped by the rhythms of the Nile, the power of royal women, and the enduring presence of gods who walked beside mortals. Imagine yourself seated quietly in the cool shadow of a grand Kushite palace, where polished stone floors reflect the muted glow of oil lamps. Around you, the soft murmur of voices, scribes, and courtiers mixes with the faint rustle of richly embroidered robes and the distant song of the Nile's flowing water. This is a place where power is woven delicately, yet firmly, through tradition, lineage, and the unwavering will of its royal women. The story of the Kandake dynasties is one of steady strength, quiet intrigue, and a matrilineal legacy that shaped a kingdom's destiny. In Kush, royal succession passed through the female lineage structure in the ancient world, making the queen mother, or Kandake, the pivotal figure of political authority. This matrilineal system ensured that power was inherited not by sons of kings alone, but through daughters, embedding women deeply in the heart of governance. The Kandakes ruled not just as consorts, but as sovereigns, commanding armies, negotiating treaties, and maintaining the delicate balance between tradition and change. Their reigns were marked by both political acumen and spiritual authority, reflecting their role as guardians of the kingdom's future. Power in Kush was as much about influence and alliance as it was about title. The Kandakes wielded authority through networks of family, marriage, and diplomacy, carefully cultivating relationships with nobles, priests, and foreign leaders alike. Their courts were centers of strategy, where decisions were made with measured deliberation and a deep understanding of the kingdom's complex social fabric. In these spaces, queens listened as much as they spoke, reading the subtle currents of loyalty and ambition with a practiced eye. Military leadership was another domain where Kandakes distinguished themselves. Historical records tell of queens who led armies into battle, their presence inspiring warriors with a fierce courage drawn from both ancestral legacy and personal resolve. These women balanced the duties of war with the rituals of peace, navigating a world where survival depended on strength tempered by diplomacy. Their stories echo through history as testaments to female leadership in a time when such power was exceptional. Within the palace walls, intrigue was never far from the surface. Alliances shifted, rivalries simmered, and power was negotiated in whispered conversations behind closed doors. Yet the Kandakes maintained a steady hand, guided by a vision that transcended individual ambitions. Their reigns spanned decades, each queen building upon the legacy of her predecessors, weaving a continuous thread of matrilineal authority that anchored Kush through periods of both turmoil and prosperity. Religion and governance were closely intertwined in Kushite rule. The Kandake status as divine representatives linked their political power with sacred duties, reinforcing their legitimacy in the eyes of their subjects. reminding all who watched that their authority was both earthly and celestial. This blending of the spiritual and temporal created a foundation of respect and obedience that supported the kingdom's stability. The influence of the Kandakes extended beyond the palace and battlefield. They patronized artisans, commissioned temples, and supported trade networks that enriched Kush culturally and economically. Their courts became centers of learning and culture, where scholars, poets, and craftsmen contributed to a vibrant intellectual life. This nurturing of arts and knowledge further strengthened the kingdom's identity and cohesion. Matrilineal succession also meant that queens were mentors and protectors of the next generation. Mothers, sisters, and daughters were educated in the ways of leadership, diplomacy, and ritual from an early age. This preparation ensured that power passed smoothly, sustaining continuity and resilience. The presence of strong royal women throughout Kush's history created a unique dynastic rhythm, where female influence shaped the course of events with quiet determination. As night falls over the palace, the flicker of lamps casts soft shadows on walls adorned with intricate carvings and painted murals. These images tell stories of queens who ruled with wisdom and courage, their faces serene yet commanding. In the stillness, one can almost hear the whispers of history, the gentle but unyielding footsteps of women who shaped a kingdom through lineage, leadership, and sheer will. The story of the Kandakes is a reminder that power need not roar to be real. It can flow steadily, like the Nile itself, shaping the land and its people with patience and persistence. Their legacy endures not just in stone and scroll, but in the quiet strength that pulses beneath the surface of Kush's ancient sands. It is a story of resilience, grace, and the enduring influence of women who walked the halls of power with calm authority. As our journey along the banks of the ancient Nile draws to a close, imagine yourself resting beneath a wide, star-studded sky, the soft whisper of the river nearby blending with the gentle night air. The stories of Kush the sandal makers with cracked hands, the fierce queens who shaped kingdoms, the sacred rituals honoring sun and ancestors settle softly around you like a comforting blanket. Life along the Nile was woven with hardship and devotion, resilience and grace, creating a rhythm both unyielding and deeply peaceful. Though the sun scorched the land and the desert winds tested every soul, the people of Kush found strength in their faith, their community, and the enduring legacy of powerful women who ruled with steady hands. Their daily struggles, from the laborious craft of making sandals to the solemn rites in temple shadows, remind us of the quiet courage required to live in balance with an often unforgiving world. In their stories, we find echoes of our own need for endurance and hope. The legacy of Kush endures beyond forgotten pyramids and burial texts. It lives in the rhythms of life still carried by the Nile's waters, and in the whispered memories of ancestors honored with gentle reverence. The kings and queens, gods and artisans, all part of a timeless flow, invite us to slow down, breathe deeply, and find peace in the steady unfolding of life. As you drift toward sleep, carry with you the soft light of this ancient kingdom, a reminder that even in the harshest places, beauty, faith, and strength can flourish quietly. Let the steady pulse of history lull you gently, like the timeless river flowing beneath the stars. Rest now, surrounded by the calm presence of those who came before, and know that tomorrow brings its own quiet strength and hope. Good night.